I'm Chief Andrew Greenwood, and I'm here with the Investigations Division Captain Ed Spiller to present our 2018 crime report. We'll report not only on crime, but also on some of our longer-term accomplishments achieved over the year. To start, of course, we're pleased to report a nearly 12% decrease in violent crime in 2018, and a 10% decrease overall in property crimes as well. 2018 proved to be an extremely challenging year for our organization. We went into the year with a staffing decline, which had started in 2017 and continued on into the year. While we are on the path to recovery now, it required hundreds of mandatory overtime shifts, for example, to keep our patrol team staffed throughout the summer. Our ability to meet our baseline service needs was really challenged, and work units such as the Investigation Division Special Enforcement Unit, the bicycle detail was suspended, and we had to drastically reduce the number of motor officers we had as well in traffic enforcement. I am happy to report that as the year ended, going in a positive direction, I feel like we're on the path to recovery for the department and ultimately looking to restore positions that we had vacant. So the outlook is good there. As 2019 has started, we continue to see a rise in staffing. We've been on the upward swing since May of 2018, and we'll touch on that in the presentation. We do have a long road ahead of us and a lot of work ahead of us, as we'll need to remain competitive and agile in our work to recruit and retain good and qualified people in what is a very competitive marketplace. We, of course, appreciate council's support in our efforts with this, for example, approving the marketing contract recently, one of your items. And we, of course, still have work to do on existing priorities and referrals. I think that work and our regular baseline work dealing with the crimes and incidents that we do on a day-to-day basis will help keep 2019 to be a busy but rewarding year for our people, both sworn and professional, for our staff and our department and for the community. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Captain Spiller, who will give an overview of specific crime data and trends and share some good work on several of our notable cases.
I am Captain Ed Spiller, Investigations Division Commander. For tonight's report, I'll briefly review the crime types I'll be covering, give an overview of our 5-year trends, and share some examples of outstanding collaborative police work. So that's better?
Yes.
We report on specific crimes as defined in the Federal Uniform Crime Report, or UCR, standards. We'll look at Part 1 UCR crimes, including property crimes, burglary, larceny, auto theft, and arson, and violent crimes, homicide, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault. We'll start with the overall Part 1 crime in Berkeley compared to the last several years. The crime types are color-coded to allow for easy comparison within the categories, and we show the numbers below each graph for your reference. Here you see the overall Part 1 crime over the past 5 years. At the mid-year presentation, we reported the crime had increased by 10%, and this trend continued through the end of the year. So for 2018, we had an overall decrease of 10.5%, representing 710 fewer Part 1 crimes. This is a 5-year trend for property crimes, where we saw an overall decrease of 10.4% with 630 fewer crimes this past year. Burglaries were essentially flat with 10 fewer cases than last year. Larcenies decreased 12% with 549 fewer cases. Auto thefts decreased 11.5% with 71 fewer cases. And arsons ended 2018 identical to 2017. The larceny figures include auto burglary, which decreased 17.5% from 2,107 cases in 2017 to 1,739 cases in 2018. Total Part 1 violent crimes decreased by 80 incidents, an 11.9% decrease from 2017. And while there were no homicides in the city of Berkeley in 2018, the number of confirmed shootings increased from 15 in 2017 to 20 this last year. Aggravated assaults decreased by 22% to 170 cases as compared to 218 in 2017. We believe that at least 12 of the 20 shooting incidents were gang-related. Arrests were made in 7 cases and suspects have been identified in several others. With each shooting, our officers and detectives go to great lengths to identify and arrest the responsible parties, take guns off the streets, and prevent further incidents. Last year on April 12th, 2 shootings occurred within 10 minutes of each other, one on the 1600 block of Russell Street and the second on the 2900 block of Maple Street. Evidence at the crime scenes revealed that there were likely several shooters in both incidents, and that both incidents were probably gang-related. Extra patrols were immediately assigned to the area in an effort to prevent further incidents. And 2 days later, an officer working the extra patrol assignment stopped a car on the 1600 block of Russell Street and recovered a loaded machine pistol. Investigators spent hundreds of hours working these cases, where there's sometimes little or no cooperation from the victims. Detectives wrote 25 search warrants and served many of them with the help of our special response team. 4 guns were recovered and 4 people subsequently arrested in relation to the 2 shootings on April 12th. Investigators were able to link several other shooting incidents to these suspects. Sexual assaults decreased 25% in 2018 with 65 reports as compared to 87 in 2017. This year we reorganized our special victims unit into 2 separate units. One unit will focus on sex crimes and domestic violence, while the other focuses on youth and family services. Sex crimes and domestic violence is made up of a sergeant, 2 sexual assault investigators, 1 domestic violence investigator, and a reserve officer that works 1 evening every week. We also joined the Alameda County Sexual Assault Felony Enforcement SAFE Task Force, which enhances community safety through their focus on predatory sex offenders and compliance checks on registered sex offenders in our community. Our commitment to the task force is to send one of our detectives to work with them on a part-time basis. In return, the task force assists us with compliance checks and casework primarily related to registered sex offenders. Robberies were essentially flat for the 3rd year in a row. This year's number of 355 reflects a decrease in pedestrian robberies and an increase in commercial robberies. 75 of our 108 commercial robberies were actually shoplift crimes that became classified strong-arm robberies after a struggle ensues when someone's trying to retain their property or prevent theft. Laptop computer thefts and robberies ended slightly higher for the year overall. One group of suspects from the Vallejo area were linked to 12 Berkeley cases.
Yeah, go ahead.
Our detectives obtained the license plate of the getaway vehicle from surveillance video in one case, which subsequently led to the identification of 2 of the suspects. A warrant was issued and one of the suspects was arrested in Sacramento County. We then learned that these 2 suspects were part of a prolific group that was committing laptop thefts and robberies from Sacramento to Monterey. After painstaking review of surveillance video, we were able to solve 12 of our cases. We also identified a second getaway car, a black Volkswagen. A short time later, one of our officers was heading home after work when he saw that the highway patrol had a black Volkswagen stopped on the side of Interstate 80 in Hercules. Robbery detectives were notified and the suspects were placed under arrest. It's the same vehicle we were looking for. During the follow-up interview, one of the suspects stated that they had focused their efforts on the area near UC Berkeley because a lot of people there had laptops. On November 9th at approximately 6:15 p.m., the EC ice cream store at 2079 University Avenue was robbed by a lone suspect wearing a medical mask who showed the employee a handgun and demanded cash from the register. The employee complied with the suspect's demands and he left the business. Surveillance video from the business revealed that the suspect walked with a distinct limp. Surveillance video from a neighboring business revealed that the suspect fled on a blue bicycle with white markings. Less than an hour later, the Secret Scoop ice cream shop at 1922 Martin Luther King Jr. Way was robbed by a similarly described suspect who showed the employee a brown handgun and threatened to shoot her if she did not open the cash register. On November 18th at approximately 6:30 p.m., an unknown suspect entered the U.S. Smog and Gas Station at 3000 Shattuck Avenue, pointed a distinctive shotgun or short-barreled rifle at the clerk, and demanded the cash from the register. Surveillance video from the business showed that the suspect walked with a distinct limp. The next day, an unknown suspect entered the Chevron gas station at 3048 Ashby Avenue and pointed a shotgun or short-barreled rifle at the clerk and demanded the cash from the register. Once again, the surveillance video showed that the suspect walked with a limp. On November 21st at approximately 8:25 p.m., the suspect entered the Sushinista restaurant at 2235 Milvia Street, brandished a shotgun or short-barreled rifle, and demanded money. Cashier, out of fear, gave the suspect all of the money from the register. This time, however, the victim followed the suspect, watched him discard some clothing and the weapon, and then directed responding police officers to the suspect, who was detained and identified as Raymond Davis. Detectives authored search warrant for Davis' vehicle and residence. The current slide and the next slide show how detectives were able to match surveillance video with items recovered from Davis' vehicle and his residence to help prove these cases. For the next section of this report, I'd like to focus on some of our other efforts. Bicycle thefts have been an ongoing problem in Berkeley for many years. In 2016, we started a project focusing specifically on bicycle theft. Bicycle theft cases were analyzed and operations were conducted in locations where the theft numbers were highest. By tracking arrests, we were also able to better monitor repeat offenders. In 2015, there were 774 bicycles stolen in the city of Berkeley. In 2016, we made 39 arrests for bicycle theft, and the number of thefts dropped to 607. In 2017, we made 18 arrests, and the bicycle theft number dropped to 524. Last year, the number of arrests was 40, and the number of bicycles stolen dropped for the third year in a row to 483. Turn it back over to Chief Greenwood to discuss some more from 2018.
So the bike thefts down 37% over 3 years, connected pretty strongly to our focus on that problem. Was really satisfying to see, and to see the numbers come down that much is gratifying, and thanks to a lot of hard work by the folks who work on that project. In 2018, in spite of major staffing challenges, our folks were able to accomplish a lot of great work, not only crime fighting like you've heard. I mean, an off-duty officer driving home sees a car pulled on the side of the road by CHP and connects it to a quickly robbery, makes the call, and results in closing the case. I mean, these are really good work, and the numbers just, we do this presentation, we talk about percentages, typically 10% or whatever, but we're talking about a decrease of hundreds of crimes. So there's some good work happening over 2018. Not only are our folks doing great work in terms of crime fighting, but also we were able to make some progress on some larger types of projects. For example, we went live with our body-worn camera program in October of 2018. In the past 5 months, it's shown its value over and over again to us. Officers have made over 28,000 video recordings in those 5 months, 28,000. Officers and our ID techs have entered over 30,000 photographs into the digital evidence management system. That's a piece of the body-worn camera contract. So we're really using that system to its fullest extent. And we've been able to benefit from being able to review critical incidents and learn from them. For example, when an officer was attacked by, the first one I remember in particular, an officer was attacked by someone, and the ability to watch that, learn from that, debrief that, everybody can see what's going on, proved super valuable. Of course, with additional incidents that have happened, staff is able to watch those, debrief them, and learn from them. We're using video, of course, to support investigations and arrests and charging. So the workaday way that works is that the officer can talk to somebody, they're on video, and the officer maybe spends less time looking at their notebook and taking notes because they're recording the statement, and more time directly interacting with the person, who may perceive like the officer doesn't be writing anything down. Well, we don't need to write things down because it's being recorded, and the officer has the ability to review that and prepare his report. So to me, that's a unique kind of change, unanticipated consequence, where the officer can just focus on the person. So they're able to gather this information during their investigations, which can result in arrests and charging decisions, because the district attorney sees all these videos. They have the ability to see them for their case and charging. We also have been able to use it to investigate complaints that we receive of misconduct, and so it's already sort of proved key, as we sort of anticipated, which is we have body-worn camera footage. You watch the footage and you get a sense of what happened. You actually can see what happened and make decisions based on that. The program has been really well received by our officers. They were looking forward to it, and I believe they find it to be tremendously valuable for them as well. So not just the chief perspective, I think, but also reflecting the perspective of our officers, who are making a great deal of effort to equip with the best possible modern equipment for their safety, well-being, and for their work. As a side note, the body-worn camera program will be a piece of our first technology surveillance ordinance report back, which has been delayed but will be coming to council. So that's a little side project that's being worked on as well in terms of compliance with the Strange Technology Ordinance. Last fall, recognizing the really severe problem we were having with recruitment, staff came up with a proposal that essentially increased the capacity of our entire operation to be able to process more and process more quickly applications and through the hiring process, and to increase our presence. So each of our 4 divisions gave up a person full-time. So that has a direct effect on kind of baseline services. People who were doing work were pulled from that work, but engaged with the task on the recruitment team to increase our recruitment. So this team was established in the fall, and they really sprung into action and haven't let up since. The team has been recruiting not only to fill police officer positions, but also dispatcher positions and community service officer positions. So it's not a single focus in terms of positions, it's a focus on the entire department and to get all of our positions full. The team has increased their presence, or our department's presence, at job fairs and community events, whether it's Berkeley High's Pathways program and Law and Social Justice program, which is an early kind of recruitment, but that 17 or 18-year-old maybe gets on the path that we want them to be on in terms of seeking a job with us. From Berkeley High School to the Berkeley Community College to Cal Berkeley, SF State, Cal State East Bay, Santa Clara, Sacramento, UC Davis, Chico State, the Special Olympics Polar Plunge, Fleet Week, various events and beyond, and even Stanford, which I have to say just because I don't even know Stanford, which would upset my father. Old blue. At any rate, the team has been really, really energetic in its engagement with us being present at these recruitment opportunities and at community events to get people involved. They also have, let's see, I guess the other thing I wanted to say was that they started tracking prospects, so we're in the early phases of this, but they've already tracked about 100 prospects. So that's people where they've got their name, their contact information, and there's already sort of outreach in the sense of trying to get them on board. They also have expanded our use of social media platforms and worked on doing the staff work to acquire the resources to support our recruitment and hiring processes. The recruiting firm that I spoke of earlier is an example of that. They are working on a bonus program. They have did an RFP and worked on getting additional background investigators. Typically we do that in-house, but we just realized even in-house we don't have the capacity, so we didn't stop doing it in-house, we're just adding to that so that we can do more backgrounds more quickly while maintaining our standards. They do things like the team will just come together and do an interview panel. So if we have a lateral candidate or two, for example, rather than take that candidate and have them wait until the next time we do a hiring panel, the team just can come together like an ad hoc and do an ad hoc panel. They're using the same interview process, but they can go ahead and get going on that right away. That also transmits a message to people who are looking at us like, oh, these folks are serious. Like I applied, and a week or two later, I'm being interviewed, and they're moving, and the background is starting. So that's a difference, a positive difference that the team is making in a big way. They do things like visit the academies, so they're encouraging and making sure our folks who are in academy are doing well, but they're also there to look for and contact unaffiliated folks who are putting themselves through academies. So we're trying to look at every possible source for qualified candidates. So they're providing tours and ride-alongs to prospects and giving those folks an opportunity to learn more about PPD. I've met more potential officers in the hallways on these tours where it's just our enforcement team walking someone around, doing the tour, and I have a chance to say hello. I think it really sets the stage for increased hiring. So we're really pleased with their work. In terms of staffing and hiring, the slide, which started in 2017, did continue into 2018. We hit a low of 153 in May of 2018. And since then, though, we've been trending up. Today, we're at 164. We still need to hire 30 to 35 people to make up for the 15 plus who will retire, we anticipate will leave, but to get us from where we are today up to the 180, 181 goal that we have. But we are hiring like mad. This slide shows the last couple of swearing-ins. You can see we're bringing people on in volume. We have some returning officers who returned to the department after leaving. We have lateral officers in these pictures, and most recently, in the lower left corner is a new officer who's an experienced probation officer in a couple different counties seeking a career change, but bringing huge experience, life experience with them. So anyhow, hiring continues at a great pace, and we're at 164 today. On the road to 181 is where we're going to be. I want to just comment on our active shooter survival presentations. You know, our focus on community safety has been served through community trainings and active shooter survival. These trainings are much in demand and have been greatly appreciated. I get emails afterwards, people who never thought about these things, people who perhaps were not really, I've had some emails of people who I never thought I'd say this about the police. They're not necessarily law enforcement oriented, and they come back so positive after having this training. And I think some of you and some of your staff have experienced it. Our staff has been really fantastic in terms of doing this work. We've had something like 24 trainings with over 1,000 people trained across City Hall, institutions, community. So we're seeing those numbers go up, and I think it's really good. It's really good work, empowering people to have a sense of their own abilities and their sense of what they can do if they're faced with a horrible situation. It means a great deal. And I'm really pleased, for example, that we have a presentation scheduled as part of our referral for Councilmember Davila's item for San Pablo Park safety. That's actually scheduled for March 30th, I think. So we're just going to continue on with that. But I'm pleased that kind of in conjunction with the recent installation of cameras at San Pablo Park will help bring a little, I hope, a sense of security to the folks around San Pablo Park and the staff there as well. We are in our third year of the Law and Social Justice class at Berkeley High School. Thanks in great part to the teacher, James Doffman, who works with us to support his class and his class development. Again, this year, demand for the class resulted in them having 2 sessions. So we've got 50 to 60 Berkeley High students in this class every morning. The social justice pathway program, though, was always envisioned as a 2-year program. So with a bunch of kids doing first year, but then those who are interested in doing deeper study, having more meaningful activities and doing it for a second year. And we're really pleased, Berkeley High staff, administration, and Mr. Dottman believe they can do the first second year course next year. There may be enough students who are involved now who can commit to taking it, and I think we hope that they're going to look at the number of students, that they'll let the threshold come down a little so we can actually do the second year course. We think that by building it into a 2-year course, you're sort of getting them all, it is that kind of pathway idea into their college studies and then into the profession. So very exciting to see both classes this year and to see that year 2 may be a reality next year. Feedback from the students continues to be extraordinary. In previous presentations, I've shared with you quotes and feedback that we've seen. We've had the kids come. It's a real thing. Like I have been talking, I occasionally will end up being sort of flagged down or talked to by students who express how much the class is one of their favorite classes of all time. So that has been a fantastic program. We continue with our Coffee with the Cop events. We do generally at least one a month, and we're rotating events throughout the city. We have met dozens of community members at these events. It's an opportunity for candid conversation. We get to answer people's questions and hear their perspectives, and that 2-way interaction and often the support that folks express to our officers is extraordinary, and we'll continue with that program. During 2018, we used overtime to staff extra walking patrols in the downtown. So, and I've got a slide out of order, sorry about that. There we go. With having to suspend our bike patrol, which generally was 4+ days a week in the downtown, we recognize there's not a police presence there. We've staffed overtime patrols in the downtown. Officers worked over 1,100 hours in 2018, especially the latter part of 2018, and thus far in 2019 have worked about 900 hours of overtime. So that equivalent comes out to probably 90 plus days where you've got 8 or 10 hours of presence of 1 or 2 officers, generally in the area, just Hearst, Shattuck University, south to Dwight. So we've had really increased coverage there, and our ability to sell the overtime has been helped as our staffing increases even incrementally, and you get people who are willing to work the overtime or interested in working the overtime. So we've been able to really staff that well. And then these foot patrols and bike patrols also provide our folks and community members for that person-to-person interactions that demonstrate why foot patrol and bike patrol officers are so effective in providing for a safe community. They're so sought after to have those programs. They give our folks an opportunity to have genuine positive interactions with people on the street. This slide is just a great picture that was taken not too long ago right downtown on Constitution Plaza, and just to me reflects kind of the positives that you have when we can post up that. So it's we like to rebuild up to have a bike patrol. In the meantime, I think it's worth it to keep posting up and using overtime to fund presence in our downtown and create a greater sense of safety there. And then with, I did have, go back here a second. So I just want to touch momentarily on traffic enforcement. So of course, the collisions we've seen have been really upsetting. So we have 2 different things happening in terms of extra resource towards traffic enforcement. One is an officer's traffic safety grant that we received, which I think is $260,000, something like that, which does a number of things like DUI checkpoints, distracted driving campaigns, and so forth. But that's one element of safety. And then we're also just posting up for resources because we have fewer motorcycle officers for the time being. Right now we have, I think, 2. We should have 6 or 7 or 8. So we're posting overtime for that too. We're getting our officers who are interested in doing traffic enforcement out there. And so we have, they've been doing that work. They're focused, if you look at the injury collisions and where they occur and when they occur, it's not surprising, it probably doesn't change much. It's the main arterials, Ashby, Shattuck, University, and so forth, up and down the entire run of it. And so they are looking for speed, for right-of-way violations. They're enforcing on pedestrian right-of-way violations. So they're really looking for those hazardous moving citations and stops that are oriented towards the primary cause for injury collisions. So they're doing that good work. And we'll continue with that. And then finally, in terms of community engagement, we look forward to opportunities to connect with community members all the time. Tonight's the Persian Festival, for example, so we have officers there. Whether it's that, Juneteenth, the Kite Festival, which you can see here, the Solano Stroll, and National Night Out. We want to be a place to show support for our community through our Pride Month activities. We supported breast cancer awareness with the Pink Patch Project, and we'll just continue to do all we can in terms of engagement and presence at community events and interacting with our community. And with that, I'd be happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief and Captain, for the excellent report. I'm going to suggest we go to public comment, and then we'll bring it back to the City Council. So we'll now take public comment on item 3, the 2018 Annual Crime Report. And then I'd like to address the City Council.
The department went through a very difficult 2017 and into 2018. I saw this when I would go to the occasional police review commissioner meeting and hear the report. I think that the department seems to be bouncing back, and I look upon this as a good thing. But despite that, there are still problem areas where I guess I just feel I have to report to you. I myself feel safe going literally in any section of the city, but there are people who do not feel safe. I was talking to an older gentleman who does not like to go downtown for fear of, and you know, what seem to be tweakers. You know, he's disturbed by what's sometimes called open air psychiatric ward on Shattuck or on University. I spoke to a young woman who is not comfortable walking south of campus because of the assaults that have occurred there. So I guess I say that as a statement of the police still have work to restore a sense of safety. You know, they're doing a good job. In an objective sense, you know, the numerical story is very solid. But I think the softer sense story still needs to come through. And I think for that, they're gonna actually need your help to work with the other elements of Berkeley city government that can handle some of these problems a little bit better. As an example, you know, the laptop thefts that have trended downward, I mean, they still grab your attention. I actually witnessed one in progress, and it happens in a lickety split. So I would just say, you know, do what you can to continue supporting the police, including with the allied city services that also complement their work, which they're doing quite well.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Kelly Hammergren. I just have a question, and I know I can't ask directly, but when do we get the reporting on addressing the policing bias? We were supposed to have an update on that, I believe this spring, and so I wanted to know what was happening with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments on the 2018 crime report? Okay, thank you for your comments. Bring it back to the City Council. I'll just start by saying I want to thank the Chief and the department for the great work that's been done this past year, not just in addressing crime trends, the work on addressing bicycle thefts. I recall a number of years ago, this was a real serious trend that we were seeing in the city of Berkeley, and having a real targeted effort to reduce bicycle thefts. And I think I also want to acknowledge and then ask a question about laptop thefts, that there was a series of laptop thefts in 2018, and there was a targeted effort on the part of the department to to identify and apprehend those responsible for those thefts. There seems to be a recurrence of laptop thefts at the beginning of 2019. At some of the same locations where those laptop thefts occurred previously. There was an article just today in Berkeley side around a laptop theft at Cafe Strata. And I know that we're working on this, and I wonder if you could share anything around what the department's doing to the extent possible around addressing this series of laptop thefts.
I mean, just preliminarily before I turn it for Captain Spiller, we've used a number of different tactics in dealing with that, including when we have extra patrol people, putting together sort of an ad hoc group to go try and work on that and work and focus on those areas. So we had some success last year with that, and also I think our investigations help out.
Yeah, basically, like the chief said, when the laptop thefts initially started to really take up, we did several targeted enforcement stings basically at these various coffee shops, and had some great results, early on, and then had a lot of spent a lot of time sitting in coffee shops and coming up empty-handed. Sometimes even frustrating, where 20 minutes after we leave, the place gets hit, and so it's a very manpower intensive task, and so we're still doing more, but then our resources have gotten pulled here and there, and so for some of these shooting incidents I discussed with really high profile, so we, pulled folks to focus on that and get, out in the park and to, follow up on some of this stuff. So we ended up getting a little bit short-handed on some of the laptop stuff. Initially numbers dropped at the beginning of the year, and like I said, we are very optimistic. We've done some reached out to these coffee shops, especially the ones that are getting hit repeatedly, and make a personal contact with management and talking about prevention and video systems, and that's helped. It's helped a lot, but it's still a problem, and it's the thing to do for a lot of these folks these days. Where it used to be it'd be easy to grab a cell phone.
Yeah.
Well, now the laptop is a prime target.
So it is a regional problem. I believe Captain Speller was talking about these, like a crew who's going to work from Sacramento to Monterey. I mean, that's 4 or 6 people who are just doing thefts and moving in and out. So it can be challenging to deal with. We absolutely have had successes because of in the follow-on investigations with businesses having good quality surveillance cameras. Some of the things we showed you this evening with regards to matching up surveillance video, which at first blush is blurry. I can't barely see that person, but when you look at that detail, that our detectives are looking at it and they're recovering evidence and making those matchups, making those investigations, closing those investigations, is really good work. So we'll continue to focus. We'll continue some of the same practice we have, and we'll just keep working on it.
Excellent. And I also want to just commend the department for really addressing key priorities, whether it's shootings that have occurred in certain parts of the city, whether it's a laptop theft series that we've seen with very limited resources. The fact that you've been able to deploy officers strategically to address these incidents, I think is has been extremely effective. I just want to note that there was an arrest recently, I believe, of somebody who I believe was connected to a shooting that occurred at San Pablo Park in August of 2018. And I want to commend the department for all your work in doing the investigation and in arresting that person. At times, just arresting 1 or 2 people can make a big difference in reducing the number of shootings that could occur. And so I just want to call attention to that particularly. I know that the neighbors around San Pablo Park have been living in fear about the possibility for more shootings happening. And while the cameras that we recently installed may assist in investigations or serve as a deterrent, nothing beats the actual investigative work and the presence that you provided. And so I just want to thank you very much for your particular focus on in being present in that particular neighborhood and the work you did in investigating that particular incident.
I appreciate that, but I think the work, these shootings where we don't necessarily have a cooperative victim and or no witnesses. The Russell Street incident involved multiple shooters, for example. It's alarming to see, and the fact that our investigators have been able to put together cases and ultimately get to charging. It's frustrating to not be able to share kind of progress reports or talk to you about talk to you in the community about like, oh, they're following on this, they're following on that. It is really remarkable that the investigators are, 24 search warrants. It takes time for this, and yet when the dust settles, we've got 4 arrests across 2 different shootings with connections to others. It's really extraordinary work on the part of our investigators. Their work is made easier when patrols response and gathering as much evidence as possible. And I know that it's really challenging for residents who live there in those moments of trauma to have that. But just know that our efforts, though we can't talk about them generally until we start getting to the point where we can, and it may take months. August, I think, was the shooting. It is being worked on. Our people do care and are working hard to bring those folks to justice and bring some sense of relief to the community and to victims.
And I just want to say that I'm very pleased to hear about the progress you're making in increasing recruitment. And I think all of us share the sense of urgency and importance of really focusing on recruitment, and I'm glad that we're making progress. It will take some time for us to reached the actual authorized level of 181, which is up from the 176, I think it was in 2016.
Mhm.
Council approved an increase of 5 additional officers.
Correct.
But it sounds like we're making progress, and I just want to commend you and the work of your department. I'm glad that we're bringing in the firm so we can really be competitive. It always frustrates me when I see join the San Francisco Police Department billboard in the city of Berkeley. and we have a long history that we should be proud of.
Right.
You know, August Vollmer was really the father of modern policing. And we have a history of innovative, progressive policing that I really think sets us apart from many other police departments in the country. And I hope that that's part of the message that we're conveying, that, you know, join the Berkeley Police Department. You continue the long tradition of really being at the forefront of modern law enforcement, and pleased that we're making progress. I just want to thank you very much for your work on that.
Thank you.
And
If I could add to that,
Yes.
I don't think we've lost anybody to San Francisco yet.
I see the BART ads, I see the billboards. We want to join the Berkeley Police Department billboards in our city.
Nobody's got the part yet.
Yeah. And so I just want to thank you for all the work. I'll just note that you know, the report does show that crime is going down, and that while we do often see reports around incidents that have happened in our community, I think there's been a particular focus on crimes that have occurred recently. If you're looking at the totality, crime is actually going down. And I just think it's important to keep that in mind. That in no way diminishes the importance of the fact that these incidents do happen. But, you know, if you look statistically, crime is going down. I think compared to other departments in the region, I think we're doing pretty well comparatively. And you are working every single day to try to further reduce the amount of crime that's happening in our city. I just want to commend you very much for all your work. Councilmember Wenger.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your good work. Last week, the Alameda County supervisors decided to stop the Urban Shield trainings, forfeiting $5 million in funds. And I'm curious to know if you have had any discussions with the fire chief about how to compensate for that loss in training exercises. I'm particularly concerned with all the new young officers coming on board, and with our more mature officers retiring, that we'll have a force that doesn't have the special training that's benefited from all of those training exercises over the years. So I don't know if you've had time to really think about it, but I'm hoping that we can figure out a way to give our officers what I think is very necessary training, so that we're not sort of left with officers who don't know how to deal with certain kinds of situations.
So that was last Thursday, where the UASI authority made their kind of final vote, which was not surprising to many of us, I'd say at the chief's level, who saw that Urban Shield, which is $1.9 million of a $5 million thing, that there was the risk of losing the $5 million. The county chiefs have a monthly meeting. We actually met last Thursday, and it is too early to figure out the effects and to figure out what, too early to say what the chiefs may try and do with their agencies or partnered up to try and do something to provide some greater level of training. I have to say it was an irreplaceable operation. It was an irreplaceable training source. It was interesting to hear in the room, to hear chiefs reflect. For example, Berkeley PD in 2007 or 8 scored very low in the competition. And that was the impetus for so those 8 officers scored low. It was frustrating, and that was the impetus for the entire team to improve, where by 2013, they were the highest scoring team. So I think that there won't be, don't wait to hear about a replacement because it's just too big of a thing. I don't think that's going to happen. We will all be looking for opportunities to provide training to our folks. And I think as far as the longer term future, we just need to keep doing the training we're doing, developing our people in every opportunity that we have, and hopefully that will, the basis and sort of the core of what the skill set and the approach that we got in part due to Urban Shield, we'll be able to continue without it for some period of time. But it is sort of too early to tell.
And our special response team, how many of the people on the special response team will be retiring? Do you know that?
I'm sorry, I don't. A couple of our longtime folks are coming up for retirement, I'd say within the next year. But that said, we have some very seasoned folks who in leadership positions with SRT, who I think are not right away, are some years from retirement, and we look for them to share their experience, bring their imagination to the fore about what to do with our training and how we can continue to give that group training, and hopefully training that also flows over to the rest of the department.
And are there trainings in other parts of the state or other parts of the country that we might be eligible to participate in?
There are no other events like this that I'm aware of. We do send groups to conferences where they get training, and we have always done that. We'll continue to do that. I will probably ultimately look at budget for that to make sure that we are setting aside funds, maybe in a formal budget request even, to make sure that the cost of that is sort of borne out in a particular way. We'll just keep working on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hunt.
Thank you so much. I share the kudos for you. I think we know that you've been struggling with, lack of staffing, like a lot of police departments, and I know people have put in a lot of overtime and a lot of careful time thinking about how to deploy your resources strategically, and it's very clear that you've been successful. So I want to commend you, and I hope that you will share with your officers and everyone in the police department the congratulations and the appreciation of the council. As somebody who grew up here, like you, and quite frankly, I remember Berkeley as being kind of a Clockwork Orange environment. I just looked at statistics on the California Public Policy Institute, and they show that property crime in California peaked in 1979 and 1980, the years that you and I graduated from Berkeley High. And so it's not just a perception, and violent crime was much higher than it is today. So for someone who's lived in the community for a long time, it feels just incredibly safe compared to how it used to be. And just to give people a little bit of perspective, in 1979, statewide, almost 7,000 people per 100,000 were victims of property crime. And in 2017, it's less than 1,000 per 100,000. I mean, it's just precipitous. And for violent crime, the peak was actually in 92, and it was about almost 3,000 per 100,000 people, and it's less than 500. So I always feel like we need to really keep some perspective when we see a little uptick or a little downtick. It's great that it's a downtick this year, but really we need to have some perspective about how far we've come and how different Berkeley is from how it used to be. Again, like the mayor said, obviously every crime is something for us to be concerned about and something for us to address. We want to continue to reduce crime. Every crime has a victim, and that's always something that we are very concerned about. I do think we have a little problem. I'll blame it mostly on social media. where despite the fact that we are, literally 7 times safer than we used to be in terms of the likelihood that each of us will be a victim of a crime, people's perception of their safety and of their vulnerability is really up. And I think that we have to really be mindful as a community, what information do we responsibly need to broadcast? And what information should we keep kind of static? It's available, certainly always available to the public, but we don't necessarily broadcast it. And I think part of our job is for people to be safe, but part of our job is also for people to feel safe. When people don't feel safe, they limit their activity. They avoid going out at night. They avoid certain parts of town. They self-limit their activities based on their perception, not necessarily based on the reality. And I think that's something that we should really talk about a little bit more. What is our responsibility as a city, not just for making people actually safe, but for making sure that they have, trying to help them have a realistic perspective on the risks in our community. And I think that's a new challenge that maybe just in the last 5, 8, 10 years, and it's something I'm hoping that we can have some further discussion about, how we can go from being a very dangerous community to being relatively very safe, yet I think people feel less safe. So I think that's also a challenge for us to look at. So I thank you so much for your role in the reality of us being much more safe, and look forward to continued positive news from the police department. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Harrison.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you very much for the clarity of the report. It was really helpful, and I really appreciate the overtime in the downtown. I have seen a big difference, and I'm looking forward to the bike patrols coming back when we're fully staffed, and that'll be a great moment for us. I wanted to say something about this perception safety issue. I think partly it's an issue of the infrastructure, what we were talking about before. Lack of street lighting, some of the environmental factors in the way the city is, impact people's feeling of being safe or not safe. A piece of that also is that we do have a sense from many of my constituents that while they are overall safer, they are a little worried about displays of behavior from people on the street that they find scary, whether or not those people would actually be dangerous or not. And I don't want to deny people's feeling of that. I think it's really important to recognize that when you have somebody acting out on the street, it is a scary thing. It's a scary thing for me, who lives downtown, to have people outside my house shouting a lot. So I think the perception thing is twofold. It's one, that maybe we talk more about crime events than we should, if that's what was being said. But I also think there's an element of a kind of sense of danger that isn't unreal. And so I don't want to discount that. And so in that regard, I want to ask you a little bit about the enforcement of the sidewalk ordinance. I know you've already started, the police department has started enforcing the sidewalk ordinance. As I understand, there's still some work to be done to get the other departments up to speed. And is that right? And how is that going for you? And what else can we do to help you with that?
Well, I think we're still working on what our approach is going to be for enforcement. So I sort of like to defer a little bit to the manager and the deputy on that.
So we can certainly speak a little bit on it. I know we met earlier today with the department. Initially, we wrote the ordinance in a way, council approved an ordinance that did not include the police department as a specific entity in responding to sidewalk ordinance behavior, specifically not people, but property. So we're trying to work through any minor meeting confer issues that we have, work on training, and get our public works folks, our code enforcement folks out, and our hot team folks out as first responders. PD at this time is not the responder. However, in the event that we need police support on an issue that rises to the nature of a police activity, then they would be called in. They have, however, spoke to folks when they're out there and they're seeing things. They, of course, made contact with folks and said, hey, there's a sidewalk ordinance. But there has been no direct protocol or enforcement for police to engage in a specific way. It is code enforcement, public works, and hot team, and parks and rec. One of the things we may need to do, there may be some legal concerns around not having police listed in the ordinance, so it's something we may need to follow up with council on, and maybe take some action on that, but they do have a role, but it is the worst case scenario role where you need police action at this time.
Thank you, that's very helpful. And I just wanted to say on behalf of the city, I feel like it's our responsibility to help you get whatever training resources you need. You know that with this, the UASI board's failure to fund the program for this year, that they did put more money into the hubs, these regional hubs that exist in the Bay Area. So not all the money, it didn't just disappear, it's been reallocated. We're in a hub, we're in the Northern County hub. And I, offer myself and the rest of us for giving you any assistance we can to help get money from this hub funding source. I don't know how that's gonna work or what it's gonna look like, but I think we're gonna have a different path to receiving some funds for training. So the money didn't completely disappear. There's 4 regions in the Bay Area, and instead of giving the money directly to the sheriff's office, they allocated some of the money to these regional sub-regions, rather, to allocate funding, but they haven't described how that's going to work. So we're going to need to figure out how to get this money to the police and fire department. How do we advocate for ourselves? What is the role of our department in making requests? All of that has got to be thought through. So the money isn't just completely gone. So, yeah, so that's just an ongoing task, and whatever help I can be in that regard, I'd be happy to. And also, just to note for the public, the funding of the Yellow Command, which is the tabletop exercise for the community, was increased significantly in this process. So that was not lost. I did want to ask you about the racial disparities report. We had talked last year about that coming about this time, and I know you're working it. Do you have a sense of when you might be presenting that to us?
I'm hoping to get you information on agenda into into April.
Oh,
so
okay.
We're working on it. There are a couple of kind of developing considerations, which I'm trying to wrap my and our minds around. For example, the capturing of data. I'll just touch on it really briefly. As you may know, in 2015, the state legislature passed Senate Bill 953, the Racial Identity and Profiling Act, which mandated that agencies are required to capture stop data and submit it to the state. They had a process of identifying what information that was, and agencies across the state will be required, based on their size, to begin submitting their stop data. They're starting with the biggest agencies first. California Highway Patrol, Los Angeles Sheriff's Office. We have an opportunity here where, in the discussion from a few months ago, I would say mid-year last year during the CP report, around that time, looking for let's gather this piece of data and that piece of data. Well, looking at what's coming with what's called REPA, the REPA requirements, what's going to make sense is to look at those. Just plan for the future, because in 2022, we will have to collect 24 pieces of information. That's the way it is today. Some of it is, only recently really started looking at it, and it's officers are going to be asked of their perception of people in ways that I kind of feel like it doesn't really happen. For example, they're going to be asked their perception, not only a person's gender, including whether they're transgender or not, but also their sexual orientation. So you're asking officers who are doing a car stop or doing a pedestrian stop, which is in connection with enforcement, general investigation, something, are now going to end up having to give 20 to 24 pieces of data about that stop with every single car stop and every single pedestrian stop. So seeing how that's developed, because we did have to wait and see what the REPA board would sort of come up with. And originally they were talking about asking people their religion, which to me is such an ethical problem. Like I'm not going to ever do that. So that is the initial kind of draft of this. Well, now it's settled. They had their processes. They published the guidelines. All to say, for example, instead of what I hope would be sort of a simple thing of adding a couple of fields, is going to turn into a project of how do we best design our data capturing mechanism to plan for, if not actually just start with the REPA requirements, and to provide for the data to be broken out in the individual databases, which is a really important part of the discussion we've had with the community last year, so that they don't have to cleave the data apart to look at it. So that's an example of how things have become complex, and my intent is to provide an update. I'm not sure if an action item or information that you're seeing later in April, and with a couple other issues. I'm hoping that's not delayed, but that's what I'm shooting for.
Thank you, that was very helpful. Thank you.
Councilmember Dowd.
Hi, thank you for the report. I just wanted to make a comment because I was kind of offended by the open air psychiatric ward comment. I didn't think that was appropriate, but anyway, it wasn't by you guys. It's by a member of the community, but anyway, I was also going to ask the question about the CPE report, but that's been answered. And then also, I understand that the arrest was made about the St. Pablo Park shootings. However, the word on the street is that all the shooters haven't been arrested. So I just wanted to make that comment, just because that's what I heard when I put that word out there.
Our detectives have significantly more information than quote unquote the word on the street.
Okay.
I appreciate it, but they're doing a great job on that case.
All right. And then I was just curious about the 30,000 photos that's on this one slide with the
Body worn camera.
Yeah.
The digital evidence management system.
Yeah. So how does that work?
So as part of our contract with Axon, which gives us the body-worn cameras, it also gives us unlimited storage in a digital evidence management system. So think of that as a repository that you get where you can put your digital evidence, for example, photographs. So our ID technicians take many, 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 many photographs, digital photos, and they are using that system. We had another system prior to that, but we're switching over. So now our ID technicians are using that system, and they could take 30, 40 pictures of a medium serious crime. Also, our officers are able to take pictures of themselves and submit it right into there. So that 30,000 just represents photographs that have been submitted. The vast majority of those are our identification technicians, the people who come out to crime scene, folks who might come out to the scene and take photographs. And then in terms of efficiency, the fact that our officers can take a photo with their department-issued iPhone, take a photo and upload it directly into that system is really a huge efficiency. The way it used to be was, if an officer needed a photograph, let's just say collision, something that's not the end of the world, they would have to call an ID tech. So another employee now has to drive to that scene, take photographs, write a report, drive back from the scene, and put those photographs into evidence. With this system, the officer can take the photos they need, upload it directly in, and we're seeing that's a huge difference. We haven't measured it, but rather than having to get another employee actually travel and come out and write a report, the officer is able to use this technology to just take the photographs they need and upload them directly into the system. So that's where the 30,000 come from. I'm glad to answer any questions.
Yeah, so I just went to like mug shots or people. I didn't realize it was evidence as well, so that's good. Good answer. All right, and then I was also curious about use of force reports because seems like you guys don't complete them. I'm wondering, I'm just curious about that.
That's not true that we don't complete them. I'm not sure what that's based on. We have a use of force policy that we've been following. Every use of force that's reported is evaluated up to and including me reviewing it. We now have body-worn camera footage that can also be reviewed as part of that process. We are still have work to do on a referral to amend our use of force policy to start capturing physical force that doesn't cause injury and that no weapon is used and that doesn't have any doesn't cause injury and the person doesn't complain. So we'll end up capturing more of that. I'm also looking at wanting to capture, just so we can quantify when we use, when we're pointing a gun at somebody, directly at somebody, or using a wrap or restraint device. We have software that was set up to be used by officers to report according to our current force policy, and however it's revised and amended to meet the prior council referral. So that's sort of what I would have to say to that.
So, from what I think you just said, you're gonna be incorporating the use of force reports to include more criteria that wasn't included before?
That's correct.
Okay.
We'll be reporting more force, but that force is gonna be physical force where there's no injury, no complaint of pain, no weapon used.
Okay. And then also, how often do you use spit hoods?
Spit hoods? I would say probably a couple of times a month. In fact, I understand that the Mental Health Commission, which you're a member, is starting to look into that. And in fact, I've reached out to the Secretary of the Commission to I'll be providing the Commission with our policy and with examples of what we use.
Okay, and then also, I think that was it. Oh, no, that's not it. You know, in District 2, there's been, I get so many calls from people that state that the police tell them things that, I mean, this is what people tell me. Like, someone called from public intoxication, and then there's about someone that's drunk or disorderly on drugs or whatever. But then there's no outcome when they call the police. And so they get, they call me because they're upset because they call the police and they don't get, or they call the police and they say, people have said to me several times, different people, that when they call, they'll say, oh, well, call your council member because that's not something that we would come out for or something. And I can't remember exactly what the incident is right now, but I've heard that like numerous times from several people. Different locations, different parts of the district. And so I just wanted to bring that to your attention because that's something that I keep hearing, and it's a little disturbing. But and then they also state that they don't see a police presence like driving through the neighborhood. I know, like back in the day when the crack days, or there used to be patrols that would sit like in certain spots and like driving through the neighborhoods, all throughout the district. And the business owners, community members, lots of people keep telling me that they don't see that, and so I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, it's a mixed blessing. So when I was a young cop, we were having 15 or 20 homicides a year, and there was drug dealing on the corners, and I spent a lot of time driving there, being there, parked there, walking there, and I'm not the only one by far. We were all doing that. There's so much less street violence and drug dealing on the corners like that I would say yes, there's definitely less presence, especially from folks who experienced it earlier on. So that's always a challenge, is where people feel like they're not seeing officers. We're staffing, we have 16 beats, we're staffing those beats, and officers are busy going to calls. So as much, they perhaps don't have a ton of discretionary time. As far as any concerning event where you are interacting with a constituent who's saying that there wasn't a police response or a proper one, either if you gather the information and let me know so we can look into it, or you refer them to me or to the department, I'm glad to look into those. I simply ask that we get the information as quickly as possible so that we can check into it. Because we're reporting the calls that are made to the communication center. We've got body-worn cameras on our officers who are handling calls, and we're an audience member like that. And so we can look into those things with absolute understanding of what happened. And in the event that an officer or dispatcher is making comments about talk to your council member, we have put out information and direction on that. Where we find that's what's happening, we're taking appropriate action. I don't think it's proper. So I apologize to the extent that that's happened, but I think it's by far the exception rather than the norm, and we are sort of set to not have that behavior.
And then Ken, with the body worn cameras, I think this is my last question. So they're on from the moment, walk me through that.
So my camera is on, it's recording, and it's after 30 seconds, it's dropping off the footage. If I press this button twice, it starts recording and keeping the recording until I push and hold this button, end the recording. So and you'll see an officer on the street, they have the camera, they just activate it as they approach the scene, and turn it off once it's appropriate to turn it off. Is that helpful?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Robinson.
Good evening. Thank you both for being here, for your presentation, for your work. I have to note first, Chief, the rainbow sash on the second to last slide was a great look on you. I just worry about it obstructing the body-worn cameras. So
I'll keep that in mind.
the report was deeply optimistic. I think the word decrease probably showed up more than any other word, which in a report like this is a good thing. The obvious exception being one that we talked about at length already, the laptop thefts. Thank you for all the work that's happening there. We were missed not paying Emily, who's right behind you. I know these have been well covered. We saw your article. The epidemic of laptop burglaries and muggings on the South Side is deeply well documented, but I think a piece of that we haven't touched on is that in that neighborhood in particular, you have the unique dynamic where you share that turf with another PD. And if in the simplest, bluntest terms I could just ask, I know the extent to which UCPD has had an active role in patrolling the South Side has fluctuated a lot over the years, and many people feel like generally it's declined. Do you feel like UCPD, as it pertains to protecting the South Side, is holding up their side of the bargain with you all? And I guess what more do you feel like you would need to see from the campus police department for you to feel like together you're doing everything you can to keep South Side safe?
So we have a long history of working with UCPD. On the crime prevention side, I want to say that they are engaged in a whole lot of education and crime prevention information for UC students, faculty, and staff. I don't want to speak out of school. I meet with Chief Bennett. I see her at least once a month. We have a good, close, collaborative working relationship. Her department has been struggling with staffing as well. I would leave it for her for the actual numbers, but I think it's possibly not an exaggeration to say they were in the 80 range and they're at 55 or 60. I don't know that for sure, and again, I don't want to speak out of school on that. I don't feel let down or underserved by UCPD in any way. When they can, we post up, for example, Southside Safety Patrol, which is added patrols on Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights to deal with safety issues, including parties and so forth. Often UCPD, when they have somebody and they can fill it, we work together with them. And it's actually, I guess I'd invite you to perhaps meet with our area coordinator, who is going to have much more of a boots on the ground.
Sean?
That's right, Sean Tinney. In fact, a former UC officer. So I would encourage you to have if you'd like to, you and your staff to meet with him and talk about the nuts and bolts of collaboration. But I'm not being let down by the UCPD at all.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kesselwani.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chief and Captain, for your report. I really appreciate it. I think it was filled with mostly good news. I was really pleased to see the serious crime stats going down from 2017 to 2018. I want to call out that there were no homicides in Berkeley in 2018. As Chief, you spoke to, that wasn't always the case. So I think we need to celebrate that. But I know, we have had very serious shootings at San Pablo Park, and I think we need to continue to remain vigilant. I also wanted to just call out the success that you've had on the bike thefts, because that has been an issue actually in my district. I think it's a problem across the city, so we appreciate your work on that. And on the recruiting issue, I appreciate all of the detail that you provided on that. I had a question as to whether Berkeley Police ever, I believe that you had some sort of program in the past, some kind of ambassador, I don't think it was called an ambassador program, but some kind of program, and I was just wondering if that has been something that has been considered. I was asked about this recently at a community meeting, if there was some way to engage volunteers. Obviously they don't take the place of police officers, but maybe they can perform some sort of community presence functions. So I just wanted to get your input on that concept.
So there, I've lost it now. You said ambassador.
Guides. I think
Guides. There we go. There was a program that was called the Berkeley Guides, who were I think wearing jackets and were especially present in the downtown, but also around BART stations. I think we're doing some walks and escorts home. Fundamentally, a challenge is just not having the staff to be able to do those kinds of programs, like a volunteer coordinator. So I recognize that there's an opportunity there to leverage benefit, but we've got to have the ability to hold that on. One kind of invisible recruitment and training thing that's happening, that's invisible sort of public, is we have a program we call the Police Aid Program, and that's where we have young folks, 18, 19, 20, early 20s, generally going to school. They're working in the police department, doing kind of just support roles, helping our folks out. Those people, including me in 1986 as a trainee, we had a program then called Aides and Trainees. They're basically sort of the same thing. My point is, if you look at those folks, so we have 3 employees now, they're part-time young people. They are successfully moving through the department. We get to know them. Then they get hired as an officer. We send them to academy. They succeed in academy, and they come out and they succeed as a police officer. So it's a kind of an unseen, very strong, very successful program that we will sort of continue with. In fact, we have, I think in a month, one of our aides, and we put him on social media. I think Sergeant Jung has put it up like, hey, he's an aide. Now he's going to police academy. We anticipate he'll be graduating soon. Yet another example of that program kind of quietly working. And if anything, in terms of resources, we were able to sort of expand that, bring more people on at that level. That's kind of growing future cops directly in our culture and our institution.
Okay, thank you for that. I did want to just touch on the issue of homelessness. I know that's not part of this crime report. Obviously, I know that Lieutenant Schofield is doing that really important community services work. I just wanted to get a sense, and I advise the community through my newsletter to call the hot team in most cases, but then in some cases where there's a safety concern or there's a feeling like somebody could be putting themselves at risk or others, that they should actually call the police. So I'm just wondering, how are you handling those types of calls? I don't really know exactly what my question is, but I'm just interested in getting a sense from you of how that works out when people end up calling police for a situation that's not a crime, but it's more of a community safety type of issue.
So what's most helpful to us in a very challenging environment where we're dealing with folks who are homeless, some of them may be mentally ill, some of them may have alcohol and drug abuse. So there's kind of a Venn diagram of really challenging circumstances for people to be in. for our community members who are calling, it's when they can report specific articulable kind of facts that lead them to believe this person is really in crisis, in danger, presents a danger, we respond out. Of course, our officers are very well trained. Many have had a 40-hour CIT training. Many have had at least a day of CIT training, de-escalation training. I mean, they deal with folks who are in crisis all the time, and depending on the peak you're working, all the time, every day. So people should know that calling the police doesn't mean that a person is going to jail, or even that they're going to get committed under the 5150 of the Welfare and Institution Code. The thing is, what is it about, what specific information can you give our dispatcher so when the officer responds, they can dispatch an officer appropriately, and an officer can respond and just try and address the situation. We don't have, of course, a magic wand to it, but community safety is our priority. And when, I guess I would just say where there's articulable facts versus there are people out who are acting out, who may be talking to themselves, maybe in a state of sort of a challenging physical state where it appears. Folks can call, and we can do a welfare check. But I think that's what I would encourage people to do, is to call, give us as much information as possible, let us assess. And I think the thing for that, and actually when people are reporting suspicious persons, we sometimes deal with a mindset that I don't want this person is suspicious. That's one sort of category, right? Or this person is in crisis, but they hesitate to call because they may think that police equal arrest. That is not the case. Let us come, let us assess, use our training, use whatever we have to try to help bring safety back to the situation.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. And then, I just wanted to ask you a broader question about promoting what I call holistic community safety. I don't think ensuring a safe community should be solely on the responsibility of our police officers, even though I'm so grateful that you all are here and available and put your lives on the line every day to protect the community. Are there things that you've just noticed in your work that I could be doing, or that we could be promoting within the community to ensure better safety?
That's a good question, Councilmember. I don't know. I guess I have to think about it. That is a very broad question. I think understanding and just practicing kind of personal safety, awareness. In I think a story I looked at today online about a laptop theft at Strata, the photograph is of a person. I'm not blaming here, but I'm just saying the photograph is of a person looking at their laptop at night with the glare lighting their face. It's a lovely photograph, but it's also not the way to be safe from your surroundings. When you're looking at a laptop at night, just the way we used to talk about personal safety with cell phones, like if you're walking down the street at night and your cell phone's on, you're looking at that bright screen, you are not able to see what's around you. And so there's kind of these fundamental personal safety measures that we really haven't changed much in there. Auto burglary, I was struck by seeing a news report from the 70s from Berkeley, Sacramento University, where the beat cop is giving information to the reporter, literally from 1974. And so if only people would not leave their bags in plain view in their cars, people wouldn't break into cars and take their bags. I have no change to that. 50 years later, no change. Don't leave stuff visible in your car. That's one way you can mitigate the risk of an auto burglary, for example. So I don't know if that's kind of what you're looking for, but there certainly are a set of kind of habits and routines that I think people can exercise without a sense of fear. So by doing that, it's not be fearful, it's not be paralyzed by the concern, it's just sort of a common sense, mitigate your risk and do as I feel like I do, which is live your life here.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it again.
I would just add that maybe you could register your video camera with our database too. So.
Right, okay.
I think we have, Captain Schooler brings up a good point. We can't cover everything in the report, but our voluntary camera registry, I think, is in 175 locations. That's kind of across town. And helping, that's kind of one way to help, is just at least to register the camera. And in fact, I think we have to register 17 at Central Park now, so we'll be right into 190.
Oh, okay. And to register, people would just call your non-emergency line,
No,
or is there a
There's a web page
Oh,
for
okay.
registry, so if you Google Berkeley Police Camera Registry,
Okay.
you get taken through the whole process.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I just want to acknowledge this Vice Mayor Wenger's item to, and I think Councilor Drosky co-sponsored it, to refer the idea of the volunteer camera database. So it's great to hear the progress. Councilor Drosky.
Yes, well, thank you for that report. I mean, we all acknowledge there's always work to do, but it's exciting to see the statistics and the decreasing crime. You know, I wasn't planning on asking a question about Urban Shield, but Councilmember Wengraff and Councilmember Harrison's comments made me curious about this allocation of funding. I don't know about these hubs, but my understanding was that Alameda County was getting, prior to this most recent vote, $5.5 million, and now they're withdrawing 4.7, and we might have like $800,000. I'm just wondering, what do you know? Clearly, that would have an impact on our training. I'm just wondering if you have more information about that, because I'm curious about this now, and how you think again that you'll compensate. I know that I talked with Berkeley Fire, and this came up today, and they said they may have to figure out how they're going to train for hazmat issues and special training. But I was just wondering if you had more information on that. But I didn't initially plan on asking this question, but now I'm curious.
I'm sorry, I don't really, I mean, at the high level, I understand that UASI is electing to give, to grant far less to the county. And the Urban Shield exercise, which has grown and developed into kind of an exercise with multiple commands and multiple disciplines being involved, is over. And that was, that involves a dedicated staff. It's a huge operation. And the comment I heard was, that Sheriff Ahern was talking to us about it. It's just like he can't even teach somebody how to do that. It's because it evolved so much from what it originally had been, which was kind of a SWAT competition and training, into so much more. So it is too early to tell. I don't have specific information about if several $100,000 were allocated or what that's going to be for. I think it's kind of too early to tell, and we'll see what sort of shakes out.
Okay, so I was just curious about that. Now I'm going to ask more direct questions about the crime report. Well, first of all, I want to say that Coffee with a Cop and the Law and Social Justice class, I've heard just such tremendous things about those programs. In particularly the class at BHS with my former colleagues, Wen Skeels and Jim. And I just really want to thank you for that's such a service to our community. In addition to Coffee with a Cop, I have many constituents that attend those, and they get a lot out of that. So I really appreciate that.
I appreciate your comment, and I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that Captain Speller is a key player in this. That it's really his leadership year to year, setting up the folks to do the ride-along, setting up staff to do the talks and the demonstrations. I'm super proud of the program, but Ed is a person who is doing the organizational work and being supported by lots of our folks, including Sergeant McGee, Matt McGee, who has been our school resource officer, has a tremendous background, and who's continued to work closely with James Dobbin, the Berkeley High instructor, to develop this class out. So I got to give props to Captain Spiller here and our staff for working on it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great. I've heard from students and teachers and community members. It's really terrific. One other issue, I guess, we're all sort of asking some questions that may not be directly in the report, and I guess I'll just use this opportunity. One issue I'm concerned about is car violence that we've seen in our community over the past few months, and how we can address sort of these significant pedestrian injuries that we're seeing. And what I'm really curious to know is how can council help you in achieving our goals around traffic enforcement and making sure that dangerous drivers are ticketed. And so what from a policy level, What do you need, and what do you need just in your day-to-day operations?
I would sort of want to take that back to our traffic bureau and the folks who are running our grant. I really appreciate the support. I know it's an important topic for our community and for council, for you, and for the entire council. I don't have a kind of a response right away to that. I think, I mean, for me, staffing is always important, and so, you know, that we keep growing that. Kevin?
Just some of the things we are doing is, our motorcycle unit had kind of whittled away to 2 motorcycle officers, and so as of last week, we got 2 more that we're now training, so we're going to get back up to 4, and we're planning to go to, further when staffing allows to hopefully 6 and see from there. So that's one thing we're doing, is rebuilding our motorcycle unit, and then 2, we've continued with the grant, trying to work on the grant, traffic officer traffic safety grant, focusing on the high collision areas, which is primarily, as the chief said earlier, the main thoroughfares, Ashby, Martin Luther King, Shattuck University. So we know where these collisions are happening, and so between the motorcycle stuff and the some other additional, we're posing additional overtime for there's patrol units to also, in addition to the grant, to further address those issues. And I've heard other, I've heard other conversations about lighting and so forth as well. So I think it's, so we're taking steps to increase our traffic enforcement, and hopefully the combination of these things make a bigger difference, because our traffic collisions were up last year compared to the year before.
Thank you, I appreciate it. And I also want to thank you and your staff for participating in our interdepartmental Vision Zero meetings to address these issues. And I know it's a great concern in the community that we try to remedy this issue as quickly as possible. But thank you so much for the report. It's, I feel as if we have a lot of hope in addressing some of these broader issues in our community, and thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bartlett.
Thank you, and I'll try to be brief. Good job. First off, thank you for adjusting on the fly, and the bicycle theft results are amazing. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing the similar efforts towards the laptop thefts. I do want to just point out that in my district we still have a number of strong arm robberies happening, particularly on the Bart route path, right, walking to and from Bart. That area still troublesome, which does bring back the lights issue. Madam City Manager, if I can have your attention, we definitely do still need lights, and that's a big way to address the crime issue in a passive sense. Accordingly, also, I do want to give a commendation to this council and the city manager for passing the Clean Commons initiative, which is also important to reducing the atmosphere that produces crime. Also, in my district, we do have a prevalence of persons with drug addiction issues, and people serving those drug addictions, and the violence that goes along with that level of predation. So I'm wondering, are there plans to institute a type of drug task force?
No. Drug task force historically has meant 2% car, 2% black cars patrolling areas where we have high-level street drug dealing. That is a solution for a problem that doesn't exist the same way. I sort of encourage council to have their eyes and ears open to discussions about drug treatment opportunities, and whatever you can do there, that's beyond my purview. We intend to rebuild our narcotics investigation unit, which is called the Special Enforcement Unit or Special Investigation Bureau. As staffing allows, we want people back in those positions. That will provide enforcement focused on active drug dealing and weapons, and also providing investigative support to our other folks, like our homicide detectives, our sex crime detectives. Sometimes you just need people to go surveil, to go find whatever it is you need. And we have been hindered in our work because we just haven't had the staff to that. So we're going to regrow that. There are plans to bring back Drug Task Force at all.
Okay, and it's good to see the body cameras are up and running. That's great for both enforcement and for accountability. It's a really positive work. I also wanted to ask you if you feel that Measure P, this is open to anyone in the room that can answer this, Measure P could possibly allow a shift in resources for mental health calls to maybe go to mental health workers and not so much the police department, so you could focus on actual crimes.
If that's a question, I have an answer. I think, so Measure P, I think those discussions are ongoing about how best to use those funds to address the problems that it's designed for. Kind of part of what you said about having police not respond, I think if we maintain or expand our capacity for people who are in crisis to have a place that they can call, that already exists. Folks can already call mobile crisis directly. So I just want to emphasize that when we go, typically it's because there's a safety issue. And our officers are able to resolve the safety issue very quickly. And then from there, it's the additional activities that are needed where I think Measure P sort of comes in. I believe I'm not going to go too far out on this, but I believe we're doing an RFP for ambulance services. So this might be like under your radar about what do we need this. So right now we arrive, make the scene secure, and often deal with people in crisis, and some of them need to be committed. We end up facing a huge challenge where the ambulance, which comes to transport the person to John George Pavilion, takes a long, long time. And as I understand it, the recent county bid is not going to provide for that service. So any support you can give in terms of understanding that RFP issue and the importance of the city of Berkeley at this point getting an ambulance resource, because the alternative is cops with people in crisis standing there waiting for a long time, which does no one any good. So that's one thing I look at for, I think, these Measure P funds, where potentially that's a super important resource if we can build it. And I defer to the manager if there's something I missed.
Certainly, I think the chief hit on pretty much all the answers. We did send out an off-agenda memo discussing the transport issue for the city and what some of our recommendations and efforts to move forward. There is an RFP process that we are looking to engage in. Measure P funding can be considered. So you have a panel of experts that will be looking at how to utilize and what recommendations to bring forward to council on using Measure P funds. So the staff has already provided some information in a prior work session around Measure P funds as well. But clearly we have a full community out there that's looking to engage with us and participate. So we'll wait to hear some of those recommendations as well.
Wonderful, thank you. And so one last question: does Berkeley City College have a law justice pathway, kind of career track?
I believe they have a minor that is kind of related to law enforcement, so it's one of probably several different tracks that folks can take coming out of Berkeley High, potentially going to community college, picking up the college units, if not the degree that they're going after, which sets them for success in applying to our department. We require 2 years of college, so potentially a person can go from Berkeley High to Berkeley City College, complete a program, and then be qualified to be hired. That's great. I also want to hire people who have a bachelor's degree. Education is a great thing to have, and life experience as well. So,
thank you.
Councilor Davila, if you can be brief with your questions.
I will be.
Ask them offline.
So, I'm not asking them offline, but yeah. Definitely with the Measure P, we need to increase the mobile crisis because there's a limited amount of hours and they're not available 24/7, so that would be helpful. But also, today I got a phone call from a person that wanted to call a non-emergency number for an ambulance transport. I don't know what the deal was. It didn't sound like it was a mental health issue, but, and so he had called and didn't get any answer. So then I was trying to call and I called him back. I got nada, nobody, just like, I called 981-5900, and it was just like a series of whatever they were saying. I don't tell you which departments, blah, blah, blah. But nobody ever answered the call. So that's an issue when you call a non-emergency number and you don't get anybody.
Right, I know we've revised that phone tree at least once, and I'm glad to listen to it and try to work out how it can be improved to make sure it captures, that you're able to get what you need, or your constituents able to get what you need.
Yeah, I mean, he wanted a transport, but he didn't want to call 911 because he said it wasn't an emergency, but anyway, so that's what he ended up doing, calling 911, because that was the only way he could get through.
That's fine.
And I just wanted to put it into the record that Urban Shield, Alameda County listened to the community to eliminate the militarization in the Weapons Expo. And I think that, and they went with the 60 some odd recommendations of the task force that took quite some time to analyze and figure out. So I think I commend Alameda County for doing that, for stepping up and listening to the community, because that was something that took some time and they were successful. So I just wanted to state that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief. Thank you very much, Captain, for your presentation. All your excellent work. We really appreciate all that you're doing, all the progress that we're making. And with that, we're going to move to the last item tonight. And I want to thank everyone for waiting so patiently. It's item 4, the Berkeley Qualified Opportunity Fund. And just a time check, it's 10:26, so we'll need to likely do an extension. And so, Councilor Bartlett, what do you think would be a reasonable amount of time to extend the meeting to?
You don't think it's 10:35 now? 15 minutes should be.
So 11:15?
Yeah, should be good.
So, so I move to extend the meeting to 11:15. Suspend the rules to complete this item. Seconded by Councilman Robinson. Right?
Yes.
Okay. We have to call the roll on that motion. No? Is there any objection to the motion?
Yes, I object.
Me too.
That's still 6.
So that was,
Why don't we call the roll?
Councilmember Kesarwani,
Pass.
Davila, to extend to 11:15.
I guess so.
Okay, Bartlett,
Yes.
Harrison,
No.
Hahn,
Yes.
Wengrath,
No.
Robinson,
Yes.
Drosky is absent, and Mayor Arden,
Yes.
and Councilmember Kesarwani.
Yes.
Okay, that's 6 yes.
Motion passes. Okay, thank you. Councilor Bartlett, thank you. Councilor Gibson.
I'm sorry.
Councilor Drosky, you want to record a vote on the?
Yes.
She votes yes.
Okay.
Okay, so Councilor Bartlett, would you like to open on this item?
Okay, so I will talk quick, and I want to thank you, Mr. Mayor, thank you, my council members, thank you, the audience, thank you, civilians, for sticking this out for so long. You've earned your stripes now, you're in. This is a trial by fire, and we have scars up here. So, the first, these two items we talked about tonight, both share in common something plaguing the country at large, and that is a deep history of not funding infrastructure. Whether it's lighting, whether it's sewage, whether it's housing, you name it, our built infrastructure has been ignored. So at the point now, this country owes $2 trillion in unfunded physical infrastructure needs. And unfortunately, much of it is located in our low-income communities throughout the country, including Berkeley, where we have 5 of them. So as a result, the Congress and the federal government created a mechanism to drive funding into these areas. And I want to give a big shout out to President candidate Cory Booker. He was one of the leaders of this. And so these are called opportunity zones, and they're meant to drive tax investment up to more than $140 billion, they're estimating, into these areas. And this is super exciting because we live in a low tax environment, so the federal government is likely not funding anything anytime soon, nor is the state. So any kind of incentive that we can create to drive capital into areas that need it is great. However, any student of history will recognize some trends here, because the last time the country decided to fund infrastructure rapidly, it was a form of redevelopment. And that was, of course, a bludgeon on many communities, and it disemboweled and dismantled many communities in the country, including South Berkeley, ironically, where the Opportunity Zone is sited, the Ashby BART station. What we are proposing here tonight is to create a new template, a new paradigm in community development by leveraging this very powerful yet blunt instrument, this Opportunity Zone, and refashioning it and making it more of a precision engine for equitable and sustainable development. And when I say sustainable, what I mean is socially sustainable, economically sustainable, and environmentally sustainable, with enhanced affordability, localized economic development with labor standards and small business support, next generation environmental design. So right now, this moment we have before us, it behooves us to act, because in 2019, we are supposed to have more than a dozen IPOs. These are companies going public, companies we know and love, like Airbnb, like Uber, like Lyft, et cetera, which will produce more than 30,000 new millionaires. Many of them live in our neighborhood, in our Bay Area communities, right, in Berkeley. And these people are going to be looking to defray some of their tax load, and they're already being courted by rival Opportunity Zone funds, because anyone can make one. Our guest here is going to explain how it works. But anyone can make one of these funds, and so the ones that have been created are market-centric. Donald Trump's lawyer has a big Opportunity Zone fund, and I know they're looking at properties here in Berkeley. I know they are, because the Allen Corridor plan is red hot, and Berkeley's red hot, so they want to be here. So in order to court these new people, these new millionaires, we need to probably give them an alternative mechanism to invest and really drive new community development standards, and we can do this. And I think we have to do it, because if we don't, someone else will. And with that, I would like to introduce Chris Caracciali, super powerhouse mega lawyer, tax attorney, one of the principal thought leaders of Opportunity Zones in the United States, and member of District 3, one of my constituents. And coincidentally, we actually were in Greece together in college. We didn't realize it until about a couple months ago. Haven't seen him in 20 years. It's wonderful to have you here. And to his left is the very esteemed, also District 3 constituent, and one of the top realtors on the West Coast, Kathleen Crandall. So with that, please enlighten us.
Thank you, Councilman Bartlett. So my name is Christopher Carroll. As Councilmember Bartlett said, I'm a tax attorney at Hansbridge in San Francisco, but I live here in Berkeley, and it's past my bedtime. But I work on a variety of different tax issues, and I typically work with wealthy individuals and companies. My job is often to try and reduce or defer taxes, right? And so these qualified opportunity zones are something that interests me very much for my clients. But I'm also interested in these qualified opportunity zones because I live in the People's Republic of Berkeley, right? And this is going to affect our lives dramatically, I promise you. Right? These qualified opportunity zones were set up under the Trump tax changes. The Tax Cut and Jobs Act came into law in December 2017. In essence, what the purpose of these qualified opportunity zones were intended to benefit wealthy investors. That is, if I sell $1 million of Google stock, I typically would have to pay tax on that. However, if I take those monies, the gain on the $1 million of Google stock, and I invest it in a fund, a qualified opportunity fund, which itself invests in certain qualified opportunity zones, I don't have to pay tax immediately. In fact, I can defer tax for 7 years. Furthermore, if the property in that zone appreciates through my investment, I don't have to pay tax on that appreciation. So this is really a mechanism for wealthy investors to avoid or defer and ultimately exclude some of their tax liability. So why is this relevant for Berkeley? There's 2 qualified opportunity zones in the city of Berkeley. One is in Councilmember Bartlett's district, and the other is, I don't know who's, is it? No.
There's actually technically 5.
Right.
So
you
downtown,
guys
South
thought,
Berkeley, and
right,
West
you guys,
Berkeley.
right. So I just see it as the zones as 2, the 3 contiguous. So one runs down Shattuck, right from University down to the Adeline corridor. The other is off of San Pablo between University and Dwight. Right? So what's going to happen, I'm telling you this, and I've met with some people, I've met with the mayor and others. You're going to have wealthy investors. I know big investment companies like Goldman Sachs and Cantor Fitzgerald and Bernstein. They're forming these funds and they're looking for places to invest, right, and buy property in these zones, okay? And they're going to come in and buy properties in the 2 zones in Berkeley because it's valuable to have property in zones anyway, right? These are valuable investments whether you have the tax benefits or not. When they buy these properties, there's a requirement under the statute, the General Revenue Code, that you refurbish the zones, right? So you can either rebuild real property, or you can actually go out and buy new property, personal property. So, for example, you could go and buy a building on Adeline and rebuild it to be a bakery, and then also buy all the equipment that you need in that bakery, right? But I can tell you this, that the big investment banks are not interested in thinking about the community, right, and adding bakeries or other things. What they're going to be interested in doing is creating real estate investments that have the highest yield for their clients. So that means rental properties where they maintain the lowest baseline, low-income housing, whatever else, right? They're looking to see these investments as simply income generating, right, based on the rental. So the city has a choice now, and you know, this was really Councilmember Bartlett's idea, but that you can start your own fund. The city of Berkeley, there's something that prevents the city of Berkeley from having its own fund. And working together with an investment bank, as well as the developers who are familiar with Berkeley, to have investments come through this fund, but be used in a more sort of impactful investment way, right? That is, people will come in and say, I'm going to invest in Berkeley's Qualified Opportunity Fund, knowing that I may get a smaller return, but that those monies will be invested in a way to promote the community rather than simply benefit the investors. So that's, I can answer particular questions. There's some PowerPoints that I can address. Let me know what I can do.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for providing us a copy of your PowerPoint and meeting with some of us in advance to go over in more detail the idea and the benefits of the city of Berkeley, and just your sense of civic duty to the city of Berkeley, and bringing your knowledge and your professional expertise to help us understand the benefits of this. So, Councilmember Harrison.
I really appreciate that this is one way that we can help control what happens in these zones, but there are other things that we can do in these zones. It is not true that if we don't do this, we have no control over what other people do with our property in these zones. So I want to dispense with the idea that if we don't set this up, which I think we should, but there will still be Goldman Sachs, there will still be all those other investors, that we have no control over that. That somehow now we're just going to be raped and pillaged. We have demolition controls. We can do development without displacement. We can insist on tenant protections. So I feel like we're sort of setting this up as like, oh my God, we're either the helpless victims or we establish this fund and then we'll be the better competitive fund and people want to go with us. I want to turn this around and talk about the precursors to this whole thing. You expressed it as a chance, or Councilmember Bartlett did, to invest in communities. It's a chance for rich people to get richer. Let's just be frank. So with that, what I'm interested in is what controls we have over opportunity zones generally. So I'd like to know from you, first of all, these zones were selected by the U.S. Treasury with the assistance of our governor's office, is that correct?
That's correct.
And do communities have any control over the selection of these zones by the governor's office?
No.
Or any influence?
There's no influence.
Okay, what criteria did they use? Because I can tell you on Shattuck, in my neighborhood, it is not a poor district. There are 19 million people in these opportunity zones in the United States out of 100 million people that could qualify. We are not Alabama. Why are they picking our zone?
Yeah,
Why are they picking Shattuck? How did that happen?
That's a very good question, right? So the zones were designated based, there are certain criteria for low-income communities already in the General Revenue Code under Section 45. And
Yeah.
so I guess the governor was able to designate these zones, to say, hey, look, these meet the criteria. It either had to be one of these low-income zones already in the code or a contiguous zone, right?
Okay.
And so, but there seems to be no rhyme or reason. Your criticism is valid. And there's, like there's amazing properties. For example, in Queens, where Amazon was going to build its big headquarters, that's a zone, right? Like Amazon explicitly decided to build there because of that zone. So I don't know that, I don't know if I understand the policy on
Councilor Harrison, I can elaborate for 1 second on that.
Yeah.
Which is that the governor's office released a list of initial recommendations for opportunity zones.
Okay.
And there was a request for jurisdictions to comment on that.
And have we done that?
We did. And this was last year, I believe. And I thought the South Campus area was one of the areas that was initially recommended. It was not ultimately in the final list. So I think there was comments that were provided by the Office of Economic Development to the governor's office on their list of recommended opportunity zones. And the governor's office took all that input and they made their decision about which should be the final opportunity.
So that didn't come to the council?
It did not reflect all of the input that was provided.
Okay. And that didn't come to the council? That was a decision made by staff?
I think it was a letter that was sent by
Okay.
OED to the governor's office as part of the comment period for the opportunity zones. Yeah.
Okay, so with that, here are what I'd like to add on to, in addition to setting up the fund, which I think we should do. First of all, I think we should be setting priorities ourselves for how this money is going to be spent. When we have Goldman Sachs, et cetera, come into our community and want to spend money, we should be telling them what we want them to spend it on. So in addition to the fact that they can fix up a particular property, we can also ask them, as a part of the community benefits package, to spend money on public facilities. So I think it's incumbent on us to think about what we're going to request of them. Shouldn't we be reopening Willard School, which is in the zone? Pool, sorry. Not school, sorry, school, wait, she said school closed. Is in the zone. Shouldn't we be doing things with our senior centers that are in the zone? So what kinds of things can we do in that vein, in terms of a community?
That's right, and so you make a valid point, right? This is not a binary question, right? Berkeley has other mechanisms to police how these zones are developed, right? And for example, I met with the former mayor, and he said, well, why don't you just add a big transfer tax whenever one of these different properties in the zone? This was Mayor Bates. That's a very good point. I mean, like there's certainly other, or you could impose new zoning requirements. For example, in these 2 qualified opportunity zones or 5, where you say, hey, look, if you're going to build in zones, it needs to be 25% low-income housing as opposed to 20 or 30 or whatever it is. So there's certainly other mechanisms available to ensure that there's not abuse in these zones.
Okay. And the definition of abuse is not very well established by the Department of U.S. Treasury, I understand.
Say that again.
They do have mention in the U.S. Treasury rules about not being able to abuse the process, but they don't describe abuse in terms of things like not evicting tenants or small businesses, not dramatically increasing rents, not losing affordable housing. None of those are described as abuse of these zones, is that correct?
That's correct. And in fact, to be clear, the guidance is exceedingly limited, right? So we have the statute that came in under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. In October, proposed regulations were published, and those are just proposed. Treasury may revise those regulations, so we don't actually know what the rules are yet.
Okay. Is there a comment period for jurisdictions to talk to Treasury about that?
Absolutely, yeah.
And when
And
does
a
that-
new set of proposed rates is gonna drop this coming week or maybe next week.
Okay.
So there will be an additional period. And I know that, for example, I shared with Councilmember Bartlett and others that there's genuine concern, I think, in Congress. For example, the Black Caucus in Congress is concerned that, you know, these zones, I mean, you said it yourself, right? This is just intended to help wealthy people defer their gain, right? And so people are gonna invest in these zones without thinking about, or with ultimately displacing members of the community.
Okay, so yeah, so I think we should, one request I'm going to make of staff is that we have an opportunity to comment on the regulations as put out by the U.S. Treasury, and that we consider commenting on that and what abuse of the zone would mean. I'd also like to refer to the city a budget process for doing an equity assessment for these districts. This is called for by Policy Link, that we look at how we establish what equitable development would mean, and we do an assessment of that in each of these districts that involves the community. That's something we can set up a process to do ourselves, and I think we should do that. And I really appreciate Councilmember Bartlett's emphasis on incentives to create good jobs, increase economic security, and eliminate the racial wealth gap for our fund that we're proposing here. But I would like to also set those as sort of our thoughts about what we want to see in these zones. That we set some sort of, it may be aspirational criteria. I don't know how much we can hold developers to this, but that we go ahead and do three things. Set a budget in the budget process, an equity assessment in which the community would participate, each of these communities. That we engage economic development in that process of this community engagement. That we consider setting criteria for how we would like to see these zones develop, and that we ask that any investors and developers prepare and distribute an annual assessment of investments according to performance indicators such as jobs protected, communities protected, jobs created, etc. And that we do that so that we are saying this is what we expect to have happen in our community. And finally, that we look at this a little bit like the SOSIP process, the Streets and Open Space Improvement process in the downtown, and talk about what kinds of community facilities we would like to see investments in. What kind of community benefits do we expect to see from these projects? So that's what I would like to see in addition to us establishing our own fund. And this is not a no, but this is a yes and. I think this is an incredibly valuable addition, Councilmember Bartlett, and I really appreciate it, but I am so concerned about what this will mean for all of us. I also think we need to understand that this opportunity zone in Councilmember Dowden's district is directly plopped on top of the historic red line. What we are doing is saying this opportunity zone is an area of single-family homes that is the historic red line. We're the only place that African Americans were allowed to live. And now we're going to send people with billions of dollars into their neighborhood to do it again. So I cannot tell you how offended I am by President Trump. I realize this isn't your fault, but I am not going to not say all this because I am so concerned about what this will mean for us. So thank you for listening to me.
And can I just respond?
Yeah.
Councilmember Harrison? I mean, I think the point here is that we're all sort of offended by Donald Trump, right?
Yeah.
But we can take what they've done and appropriate it and you make something good out of it. You know?
Yeah, but we need to have these steps in place to do that.
Absolutely, right? But I think that it's fine. So they've done this, but it doesn't mean that we can't use it to the advantage of the community.
Right, exactly. Thank you.
Councilor Hahn, before Councilor Hahn speaks, one approach that jurisdictions are taking is they are developing an investment prospectus where they're sort of identifying, and I did send this information to our Office of Economic Development. There's an organization called Accelerator for America that was sort of organized by Mayor Garcetti in Los Angeles that's focused on how cities can be positioned to take advantage of the opportunities through the Opportunity Zone regulation. And so while this fund is one approach, another approach would be how, not only what are our regulations and what incentives do we provide to steer equitable investment and equitable development, but also how are we positioning Berkeley towards investment of priority projects, public projects, private projects that have community benefit. So I think that's another element, being proactive about how we take advantage of this, that I think we also need to consider. Councilor Hahn.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate your coming here tonight. I want to thank Councilmember Bartlett for bringing this with a sense of urgency to us. I am a little alarmed to learn that letters went out a year ago, sort of on behalf of Berkeley, that we did not know as a council what was going on, and I hope that in the future we have the opportunity, every opportunity there is for the city to have input in shaping these programs, both within the city and possibly shaping the program nationwide. I really think that those need to be brought to us. So I just, if something's going to be imposed on us, then there are opportunities for us to have input. I think that's important. In fact, I'd be interested in knowing if there's an opportunity to appeal the designation of the zones. So, sort of a big topic, but I hope that we will continue to be well informed, and I really appreciate your coming and your presenting and really bringing us up to speed on this. Obviously, opportunity, not necessarily opportunity for our community. I think the name Opportunity Zone probably was intended as opportunity for people who like to invest in real estate. But I think it's important for us to look at that, and maybe there's an upside for us too. That's, I think, what you're trying to develop here. How can we take this, harness it? How can we, if it's going to be imposed on our community, how can we control it and mold it in a way that it meets our values here? Obviously, for me, displacement is the biggest concern. The areas that are chosen, although some of them may have been a little off, seems to me target areas where the upside of the investment is the greatest, and those tend to be areas near transit, areas that are quote unquote gentrifying, and that kind of investment you can really have a greater return, but that often means displacement of low-income communities and communities of color. So as my colleagues, I'm very suspicious of that. I'm very concerned about that. I love the idea of 50% affordable. Why can't we do 100%? I mean, is there any reason why that couldn't be? I know unannounced, and so I won't say what agency, but I do know that at least one big affordable housing agency in the Bay Area is looking at establishing a fund and doing 100% affordable projects, massive projects. So why couldn't we do that? Is there a reason why we pick 50%?
There's actually there's no restrictions. In the statute or in the regulations, it doesn't speak to levels at all. The only requirement under the statute and under the regulations is that people defer they have to roll the money from some investment into the fund, and then the fund itself needs to invest those monies in the zone and either substantially rebuild real estate or purchase new assets to put to use in the zone.
Were you suggesting 50% because you think that would provide the kinds of returns that investors might be looking for? Or was that just kind of like, hey, let's go for 50%?
These are policy questions. I mean, clearly there's going to be some economic aspect to this where I assume most investors are going to want some sort of return. And so these are questions that really they're policy questions for the council to consider about, well, what's going to make us competitive with Goldman Sachs fund, right? But also allow us to get money into the fund and use it to build.
Mm-hmm. And could other people, so lots of funds can be created, right? And they all can compete for projects in a district. So it's not up to us. The fund is not reserved to the area, right? So there could be funds where it's 100% affordable, 50%, 0%, and all of them could be looking to buy properties within the district.
Right. Yeah, and my only response is that part of this the statute requires development, right? That you need to go in and refurbish these buildings when you buy them. And so I think the council should also consider the relationship between the developers in Berkeley and these zones, right? That typically the city and the staff are working probably more antagonistically with developers, right? Where the developers want something and the city's saying, well, no, you can't do it this way, right? If this works, and I've talked with developers here that work in Berkeley, and Kathy's made lots of important introductions there, right? Like, they see this as where you could work collaboratively with these developers, right, to build these things and get it done more efficiently. So I think there's some economies of scale, but there's a lot of policy questions that are above my pay grade.
No, okay, well, I just didn't know if that choice of 50%, there was some special reason for it. Okay, thank you very much. I really look forward to continuing this topic, and again, really appreciate your bringing this to us.
So it is 10:55. I'm going to exercise the chair's prerogative, and I do like to allow more robust discussion in these work sessions, but given the many people in queue, I'm going to ask that people limit their comments and questions to 3 minutes. And clearly we're going to need to discuss this issue further, and what I might suggest is that we refer this to a policy committee, which I guess would be the Land Use, Housing, and Economic Development, because we clearly need a lot more discussion of this option, many other options that could be considered, the proactive sort of prospectus and active marketing efforts. So 3 minutes. Vice Mayor Winger.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming, for waiting all this time. I have some questions about the actual law. Does this sunset at some point, or what is?
It does, and so the zones actually go out of existence in 2028, but there's some 2028. That's right.
Okay.
Then there's some technical rules that I suggest the council means that you should accelerate. So for the sort of process, if you're going to go ahead and set up this fund. So in order to, as I said, the trigger is that when you sell an asset, you need to take those proceeds and invest in the fund. Right?
And how many days do you have to do that?
180 days.
So it's the same as a 1031?
Exactly. So
okay, I'm familiar with 1031.
Right. And so if you hold your investment in the zone, so that's just a deferral provision until the end of 2026. So again, my hypothetical of $1 million of Google stock, if I roll that into the fund, and the fund invests in the zone, at the end of 2026, I pay tax anyway. But because I've held for 7 years between 2019 and 2026, I can exclude 15% of the gain.
Right.
So in the hypothetical